Our scripture reading today is from Genesis chapter 40. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in the custody of the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why are your faces so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." "This is what it means," Joseph said to him. "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. For I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in the dungeon." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. On the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." "This is what it means," Joseph said. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat away your flesh." Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. This is the word of the Lord. What significance did those who interpreted dreams have in the ancient Near East? Why is this story of the dreams so important that it takes up 2 chapters here and is a significant part of chapter 37 and the young Joseph's relationship with his family? Apparently, in the ancient Near East culture, it was believed that the people who interpreted dreams were those who were in tight connection with the gods and with divine messages from the spiritual realm. That would be Pharaoh, perhaps some of his top advisors, and maybe a priest or 2 closely connected with Pharaoh. The opinions of others were not sought or trusted. Do you remember what phrase we went back to again and again last week? "And the Lord was with Joseph, and everything he did prospered." The king's guard put Joseph in charge of his household. And when Joseph was framed by Potiphar's wife and was put in the prison where the king's prisoners were kept, he was put in charge there. Interesting intersections of events and gifting, I would say. Joseph is put in charge because the Lord's favor is upon him. He is moved into a place where he is asked to interpret dreams. And because he is in a position of leadership, his opinion is sought after, valued, and trusted. How did he end up in prison if his gift as an interpreter of dreams was so valuable? I believe it was just a step on the way for Joseph. Do you recall the boy dreamer from chapter 37? As you might remember, Joseph had two dreams. The first was about the 11 sheaves of wheat bowing down to the one sheaf. We will see fulfillment of that dream in chapter 42. The second dream was about the sun and moon and 11 stars bowing down to Joseph. The narrator told us that Joseph's father, Jacob, kept the matter in mind or pondered it in his heart. We also learn that the brothers were jealous of Joseph because his father loved him more than them, and they wanted to kill him. So we have some circumstances to consider. Have you ever looked at the pieces of your life, the chapters, the people, the events? It seems like every year, every new paragraph or page or episode brings a deeper understanding of the amazing tapestry God is making of our lives. There are some chapters, maybe even those from long ago, that still don't make sense in the whole picture of our lives. For at least 40-ish years of my life, the thought of being a pastor was the furthest thing from my mind. For one thing, we already had a pastor in the family, and I was deeply convinced that one was enough. My life as a mom and a teacher was fulfilling and rich. The homeschool chapter was coming to an end, though, and I was beginning to wonder what God might have for the next era when all the girls graduated and headed out to learn of the world beyond family and hometown. I was thinking about becoming a spiritual director, working alongside Brian in his ministry. One day I met with Reverend Kate Connolly for lunch in Salem. She was a friend and also the DS for the then Western District, which is now the Cascadia District. We were talking about my thoughts of what to do next, and she simply asked, "Have you thought of the ordained ministry?" Literally in a flash, I said, "No, I haven't, but that's it." I knew from a deep place in my heart that God had been preparing me for the yes of that moment since the time I was very, very small. Circumstances in my childhood, some very painful and hard, were part of the formation of that call on my life. Other circumstances and people were part of the picture. Sally Warrington, the woman who discipled a group of girls my age when we were in junior high. Brian's call to attend seminary and our move to Wilmore was so significant. I resisted that move so deeply it took me 15 years to fully forgive Brian and God for tearing me away from the life we had in Santa Barbara. One fall morning in Wilmore, I sat in the hallway outside one of Brian's classes. Our baby was crawling all over the shiny floor. Cheerios kept her quiet so I could hear what the professor was saying. At that point, my heart cried out, "I want to come back here and study. I want to get a master's degree." Life as a pastor's wife, a mother, a homeschool teacher filled the years. There was no time to even wonder about further education or the next turn in the road until that lunch with Kate Connolly. Have you ever considered the ordained ministry? Joseph had a gift of dreaming and interpreting dreams before he had the maturity to live into it well, but still, God released the gift in him. Some scholars suggest that the dreams in chapter 37 served two purposes. One, they created an even deeper chasm between Joseph and his brothers than existed already. He was already their father's favorite, and this new twist made them jealous and hateful enough that they wanted to kill Joseph. In fact, they almost succeeded. But their failure to kill him ended up being the thing that got him to Egypt as a slave and eventually led to his position of power in Potiphar's household. The other purpose for the dream was to confirm Joseph's function as first among the brothers, at least as the son of Rachel, Jacob's favored wife. Joseph, gifted with the power to interpret dreams, was the one to rise to a position of power for a reason. As we will see, Joseph rose to power in order to save Jacob's family and eventually the nation of Israel. This, I believe, was what Jacob was holding in his heart as he heard the dream of the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowing down to Joseph. Now the dreamer is in prison, in charge of the prison basically, and two of the king's servants have dreams, the cupbearer and the baker. Joseph notices they are downcast after a rough night's sleep, and they mention that they have had dreams, but there is no one to interpret them. Joseph's statement is a strange one at first glance. Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. It seems that Joseph knows that God is the source of the meaning of dreams. Like the Egyptians who believe in the divine connection with humans in power, Joseph also believes in a divine source of understanding. His faith is in God, Yahweh, as the source of meaning. It is almost as if this statement is Joseph's yes. He acknowledges that God gives the interpretations, and he also acknowledges that God can give the interpretations through him. Perhaps with all the time in the pits and the fancy house of Potiphar, the false accusation, and the prison sentence, Joseph has come to know deep within what God's purpose and call is for him. What steps, what people, what chapters, what deep pits has God crafted in your life so that you might know your purpose, your call, your reason for being alive? Perhaps you are still searching, or you're in a season of formation. Perhaps you're spending more time reflecting these days on the earlier chapters of your life and wondering how God will wrap it all up when the time comes. My own yes to God involved an 8-year process. 5 of those years involved seminary education. I did go back to Asbury for some classes. I sat in a classroom close to the one where I had felt the longing to attend Asbury, while out in the hall with a crawling baby and a Tupperware container of Cheerios. I also attended George Fox Evangelical Seminary and graduated with my MDiv, my Master's of Divinity, from there. I wrote papers and made theological statements and made it through interviews. And when I sat in my office in my first appointment for the first time, I think I felt like Joseph might have felt when he made his statement that dreams, interpretation comes from God, and that he, Joseph, was able to interpret dreams. The pieces all came together. The yes, the schooling, the call, the appointment, and the learning that comes with a new job. Is this call not from God? Yes. Will he not teach you how to walk in this call? Yes. Joseph's practice session with the cupbearer and the baker was a good one. He interpreted the dreams exactly correctly, and still he did not get out of prison. The cupbearer, excited to be on the outside again, forgot all about him. Was this not part of God's plan as well? What does God's timing look like in your life? Are you still waiting? Are you learning a deeper part of God's purpose for you? The waiting, even when we see God's purposes coming to play, is not easy. Sometimes we feel forgotten. I felt some of the emotion of Joseph's situation in the last line of chapter 40. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. The response song this morning is not a particularly Christian song, but I feel like the message is one we need to hear, to know that wherever we are on the journey of discovering purpose and God's involvement in our lives, we will be found by the God who loves us and has a definite purpose for our lives. Amen.